Second big idea is Mesa Vista should offer an attractive, vibrant new center on the east side. And that, we've shown this graphic, instead of one use after another separated by a sea of parking, red for retail, blue for institutional, yellow for office, orange for residential, what traditional neighborhood development, something we call new urbanism, works to do is to take those pieces and put them together. And this is that. This is the first pass of the town center. It combines creative development 1 and creative development 2. The geometries of the streets and the blocks look very similar, but we've had more time to work on the specific design. Myself personally, James Doherty, one of our designers, Kenneth Garcia, who was working on plan and renderings, really the whole team, Pam, Allie, Rob, Sue, Victor, everybody's been participating in the creation of the center in order to get it right. You see an interconnected network of streets. You see small walkable blocks. You see a lot of green to handle the water, and you see connections to the neighborhoods west and south, east and north. And if we zoom in, you can take a look at how it really looks. At the very, very center could be something like a gazebo or a monument. And throughout the southwest, there are plazas or placitas, and quite often there's a gazebo at the middle, and there's paths for people to walk, and there's shade, and they're fronted by buildings like the ones that you see here that Kenneth designed and modeled. And you see that in spots, it's a manicured green, and in other spots, the land is left largely untouched, best that is possible. And we zoom out just a bit, still see the gazebo. We're starting to see the entire plaza. And then you see the soft trees. Maybe it's acacia or Belicia, or maybe it's Palo Verde or desert willow. And they're planted with enough space so that way their roots are able to grow and they're able to take in water. And from this plaza, you see small courtyards. The trees grow slow, and they tend to be fragile and willowy. What we try to do is to make sure the buildings can provide as much shade as possible, such that if you're in this courtyard space, and if these buildings and parapets are tall enough, you are in the shade for most of the day. And you also have a feeling of being in a comfortable outdoor room. We zoom out one bit more, and you see Mesa Central Drive. This is an existing roadway that runs through, and we zoom out one more time, and you can see Mesa Grand. And I think the beauty of this design is that there is a plaza, but there's also the small courtyards. This courtyard is sort of the first increment of Hispanic and Mexican and Spanish architecture, the very small courtyard fronted by buildings. And then you see the larger green spaces, you see larger greens. Very rare, and probably maybe never at all, is there turf grass, but there are trees that are planted. Low water, drought tolerant, appropriate trees. And then you see, as you zoom out even further, that there's a transition. The town center is more than just where there's restaurants and commercial and workplaces. The town center are also the homes on the edge, which people are able to walk to from the center and walk from in order to get to the center without using a car. So the center is both the plazas and the placitas, and it's also all the homes that are connected. The other interesting thing that you see is, every once in a while, the street doesn't have to be one that has cars. You have the paseo or the passageway that would take you from one courtyard space or plaza to another. And these are the areas where you find, trendy restaurants with Edison bulb lights and polished concrete floors and chalkboard menus. These are the places where you would find life and excitement and opportunities to socialize. we talked a lot about gateway and what's one's first impression. The first impression that you have of a city is unshakably tied to what you see as soon as you cross that line, and the memory that you have of a place can be based upon that first impression, and it's important to get that right. And so what the plan attempts to do is facing Highway 70 is a plaza, and you can see into this, and you can see that something different is happening there. Now, all throughout Las Cruces in the downtown used to be great storefronts like these. And they were proud, and there was glass, and there was awnings and galleries shading the pedestrians. There's very few left. They're still there, and they're seeing a revival. But you can learn from buildings like that. A walk must be safe, comfortable, but also interesting. And the glass and the ability to look at the things for sale or the people inside those windows keep town centers interesting places. And so with the code, we would require storefronts like this. The smallest increment, again, is just the small plaza. And here's the galleries like used to be in the downtown. And the downtown now has outdoor dining, and it's back. And it's important to be very deliberate about, if you're asking people to be outside, you've got to be very conscientious, careful about the design of the outdoor environment. Otherwise, it's too hot or too windy or too sandy. The great thing about the three-sided plaza is that it's got a high level of enclosure, it's blocking the wind, it's creating shade, and it's cooling down the area. I'm really excited about this. These projects take a long time to develop, but this wouldn't, You can imagine in the next 5 years or so, a small courtyard like this, bordered by 3 different buildings. And that's enough to create a town center to start it off. We'll talk about the neighborhoods. As you move from the town center down through the plan, it can't look like this. The dominant visual image can't be garages, and it can't be curb cuts which break up the sidewalk, and it can't be treeless. This is not a walkable environment or an interesting one or even a safe one. There's no eyes on the street. It's got to be something a little bit more like this. On-street parking creates a barrier that makes the pedestrian feel safe. Street trees cast shade, planting strips for the trees to get water, sidewalks for people to walk down, and every once in a while in certain areas, it's ideal to have the front porches within conversation distance of the sidewalk and casting shade onto the sidewalk. There's still garages and there's still plenty of places to park like this, but by virtue of design, it's less intrusive and it feels like a place where people want to be. And there's several different approaches that you take in order to do this. Parking tucked discreetly behind a layer of the habitable space. You divide the lot into different layers and you say no parking in the first layer. In this diagram by James Doherty, he created a possible block, and then he showed how the pedestrian realm, the space in between buildings, can be a comfortable space. Buildings are close to the sidewalk to provide shade. Driveway curb cuts are kept narrow and to minimize sidewalk interruptions. Street trees and on-street parking, and on corner lots, and every once in a while, the parking doesn't even have to be located directly at the center. It could actually be in the very back of the lot. And if you're able to do this, then you're able to create, again, best you can, continuous sidewalks. In other places, something more is required. On the most prominent greens, the places that see the most pedestrian traffic, parking is handled in the back, either by a parking lot or by use of a residential alley. So that way the sidewalks are completely unbroken up. If we look at the overall plan in terms of the town center, regional park, you can see the multiple neighborhood centers. And then here's the arroyo areas, which continue throughout. These paths, these trails, quite often on the ridge of the arroyo, and we'll talk more about that in a second, sometimes provide an even quicker and more direct route from point A to point B. It might make sense some days just to walk and not to drive. The paths are not just parallel to streets, although quite a few of these streets would have, in fact, one of the rules of walkable urbanism is that every street should have a place for cars, a place for pedestrians, and a place for cyclists. And then even better, these routes that would connect you from one place to another.